This is Power 102 Digital Monday. Today, Monday, Hard Talk with host Karen Nunez Tesheira starts now. Good afternoon, Karen. How are you?
Good afternoon, David. Long time. Well, last week, well, couldn't be helped. I think that our Minister of Finance made sure we went right up to, I think, 6 o'clock.
Yes.
So there was no way that a show could have been had or any commentary actually would have been, we couldn't have done anything about that last week. So we are here this week and happy to be back. Happy to hear your voice, David, and always putting on very relevant um, choices of music. I don't know if it's true that Lenny is no problem. I think it is the problem. So I think it's tongue in cheek. But
Yes.
it has to, it has got to be. But don't let the Minister of Finance hear you say that because he lives in another land of, I would call a little bit of make believe, where money is no problem for him, perhaps. But anyway, I'm happy to be back and, of course, joining the listeners, the new and the ones that always follow us every Monday. Happy to join you again on today's discussion, discourse, which I would like you to contribute to. As I've said every time, some of you would prefer to leave comments and ask it that way. That's fine, but I also you can call in because this is a really important discussion, and that is the post discussion post the budget. Yes, I have been on other shows and on other programs, but this program on other programs discussing even before the budget, pre and post the budget, but they're much shorter programs and much shorter interventions. So I hope we can get through a lot today. And I'm looking out for our special guest today, David. Before I just confirming, of course, she's very happy to join us. Is she backstage at all? I just want to make
No,
sure before we.
I haven't seen her appears yet.
Okay, but I know you're going to check on that,
Yes, I.
and I will leave it until she joins us. Clearly, you know, it's a female, but it's a very well-known person in Trinidad and Tobago in terms of commentary on the economy. A well-known economist with special interests on sustainability and competitiveness, and really to be really admired. Um, Even going back to my early days. When I was in government after that, always there giving of her time and her energy to the people of Trinidad and Tobago by giving very insightful commentaries, whether on television or in the newspaper or any other media. And so we have her on. Hopefully, she will join us soon. David, we need to put out the numbers because we really hope that people will call in,
Yeah.
and our guests will join us shortly. Um, you always do the needful because I'm so bad at this, this part of it.
Yeah. Let me give them the numbers. The numbers you can contact us at are 222-8255, 222-8255, 866-525-1099. That's our toll free number, 866-525-1099. You can also share your comments via Facebook or YouTube as we are streaming live on both platforms. Yes, Karen.
Right. And perhaps we can just, David, I know you always will do that, make a little back check to see where our guest is, because I know she was very pleased to join us with
Mhm.
immediately when I asked her if she would come on, there was 100% um, agreement to join us on the show, and I know she's going to have a lot of input. I will have a specific kind of lens through which I would look at it, because having served in that office as a minister of finance, which gives you a particular way of understanding, hopefully, what a budget is, what a budget process is, and what it's intended to achieve. So I have that sort of, I don't know if I don't know. I think I have a particular perspective, which I hope to share. But we are going to look at dissecting this year's budgetary presentation of 5.5 hours, I think it was. I think we could all agree it was quite unnecessary to put people through that, because that is what it was. It was putting people through something. I make no apologies for saying that. And the reason well, many people may have left and come back, and take and whatever they may have done. But the reason why he had a captive or captured audience, because everybody was listening for the fiscal measures and the revenue and expenditure numbers. And that always comes at the end of a budget presentation. So the minister would know that. We all knew that. It's never been any different. And it should not have been any different this year. So that we wait until he talks about Tobago. It's a format, which I think is good. It's a good thing that we have a format. Go look at the, when you're doing a budget statement, you look at the global outlook, because what happens globally, especially since we are in the energy sector, and our major export is an energy sector product, either LNG or petrochemicals, urea, ammonia, and it's three of them, and methanol. Those are the major petrochemical exports from the downstream industry. So we have to know what's going on globally, because that is our market. That's our marketplace for our product, and that's how we get our foreign exchange earnings principally. So we look at the global outlook, and then we go more closely to home, and they look at the Latin American and Caribbean region, and do a quick see through at where their good positions are, inflation, basically major factors that tell you about the health of an economy, how well the economy is doing. That was done this year, as is always done. And then what should be done, and I will say that anyone interested could go to the Ministry of Finance, and there is really a very good document of what is the budget, what is the budget process, what is involved, and even the short explanations for a lot of the technical terms that you would hear, so to help you to understand, out of be able to follow some of the the jargon, the economic jargon or the budgetary jargon that to some people, you know, it would be challenging, as any technical language is. So I would invite you to do that, because I certainly not only looked at the different budgetary statements over the years since this government has been in office, which is since 2015. So they're going into their 10th year shortly. The new fiscal year ends on the September the 30th and begins October the 1st of each year. And that is the process, and that is what has happened. He called the budget at the last day of the fiscal period, September the 30th. I think that's Monday, and goes through the different what you would like to do is do give the country an account of what happened over the last budgetary period, because this, as in every budget that is being presented, it's a projection of what you hope based on certain data, certain which we use the oil and gas numbers to determine what the revenue take will be, the numbers, the price, and the production. And we use that. And of course, the expenditure does not very much differ from year to year. There are certain ministries that will always get the lion's share of the budget through its appropriation. So the budget statement is not the legislation. The legislation is the appropriation bill. So the budget statement, and they do explain that I'm waiting on our guests to come, so I'm just going through this. David, you can interrupt me at any time. But it's interesting. I heard a commentator make this statement, but also the former governor of the central bank, when I now became a minister, also said that to me. And even in their definition of what is the budget process, they made it a point to say that it gives you the revenue projection. It's a projection. So usually he usually would be able to tell you what happened in the last budget cycle, which would have been 2024. Did we realize the revenue? Was that expenditure? Did we spend the amount that we anticipated that we were going to spend? And did we or did we not have the deficit, which is the normal case, meaning a difference in the expenditure from the revenue. So this is projecting what you think it will be. And 2024, which is really 2024, because the new budget cycle starts October of 2023, but most of it is in 2024. Just ended just 2 weeks ago. So this budget cycle, which is 2021 and 2025, but it's really 2025 because most of the fiscal period is in 2025, is a projection, and it is projecting what your revenue take will be. It is projecting what your expenditure will be, and it does, as it always will do, which is the government's responsibility, safety, security, ensuring as much as possible sustainability, that persons are able to have opportunities to improve their lot, a higher standard of living, all those things that you entrust in a government. They do it through various ministries, and the ministries also have the state enterprises. And so the appropriation is coming. I'm just giving you a little background, waiting until our guest comes. That money goes into what they call the consolidated fund, which is the revenue. The revenue is the taxes, mostly taxes. Some of it is non-tax revenue. Non-tax revenue can come from investments that we make either abroad or here. For example, we have invested in the LNG trains. We have a 10% shareholding in train 2, 3, and 4, where we did not have I think we only had a shareholding in train 4. But with the unitizing or bringing together 2, 3, and 4, 1 was out of the question. Shell and BP would not be part of that, despite whatever the Minister of Energy wanted to say. It just didn't have enough natural gas. But they unitized the 2, 3, and 4, restructured it. But the restructuring is now that 45% is BP, 45% is Shell, and 10% is NGC. So I don't know. I suppose you might say we have more, because we didn't have any I don't think we had any shareholding in 2 and 3. We had in 4 and in 1. And 1 is gone. But now we have 10% in the 2, 3, and 4 trains. I'm not sure, I don't know what the numbers really will look like, that if it really improved our position. The minister says it does. People say a lot of people say, well, now you have a share in 2 and 3, not only in 4. So yes, that is an improvement for sure. So those are the places you get your revenue from. And another way that you get your revenue from non-tax, because most of your revenue is coming from taxation, whether it's corporation tax or when you tax the energy sector, supplemental petroleum tax, royalties, different categories of taxes that are under the Petroleum Act. Apart from that, you have your non-tax revenue, which is from investments. And also, of course, you have your capital revenue, which would be from investments in capital projects. Well, the only capital revenue we have is from selling out chemical assets, which is a crying shame. A crying shame, that is what it is. And the minister says, but up to now will not provide us with audited accounts. We need to see audited accounts. You said to us, CLICO has been paid off. CIB was taken care of a long time ago. British American, well, you were very vague about that in your 5.5 hours of talking. But you're saying that CLICO or CL Financial still owes the government. CL Financial and its subsidiaries still owes the government 31 billion. Where do you get that number from? Don't you make money from a lot of the sales of all these assets? You have Angostura. You sold off the Proman shareholding of 58%. I mean, where is the accounting? You just it's very disturbing. It's very, very disturbing when he can blithely say to us, "Oh, no. We don't have any money to give to the shareholders or CLICO, CL Financial people." Yes, CL Financial, CLICO owes us no more money. That's true. CIB dealt with. Where's the 31 billion coming from? That's British American, because in the MOU, it was 3 companies that were the companies which the government said that it was going to assist because it had presented a real threat to the financial system of Trinidad and Tobago, because that was a global phenomenon anyhow. I don't think anybody could forget 2008, where the entire world was affected by the global financial crisis, and we certainly were not spared that. But as, and so that Clico had over 100 billion US in more than our entire budget in assets. Assets, however, that were tied up in all kinds of, tied up like a good blue crab. And because because it was not trading on the stock exchange, it was a family company, it was very difficult to get from them in the short time frame that we had exactly what exactly those assets were. And a good example of that was what happened with the that company that is, gosh, what's the name of the company that they hid from us, the sale of the sale by Clico and CL Financial of to Proman Industries, where CLF through Clico and itself had a major shareholding of 51%, went behind our backs and sold it, and that went to court. But the point is now we are not being told, we have not seen an audited account. So I'm asking, waiting, David, have we gotten in touch with our guest?
I'm trying to contact her via the phone, but I'm getting no responses. I haven't seen her backstage. So let's hope that she comes on.
Yes, but and let's hope she comes on, because I don't want to be the version of Mr. Imbert. Karen, is 13 billion, not 31. I said 13 billion. I said 31 billion. Somebody said I said 31 billion.
Yeah.
It's 13 billion. Well, but if it's 13 billion, where's the 13? Even if it is, thank you for that correction. I mean it genuinely. But even if it is that, where it's all we are asking for is any company that's operating, you are spending our money, not your money, our money. And you have told us that Clico has been cleared off, CIB has been dealt with, but you come and just make a broad statement that they still owe, thank you for the correction, 13, the person said no problem, 13 billion. But 13 billion, however you cut it and dice it, is a lot of money. And we don't have any audited accounts. They're not making money from Angostura. They're not making money from all this, from the sale of, which was never did badly. Call Fire, they didn't make money out of Call Fire. They're not making money off of the mall that they sold. How much money have they made? And all the consultants, I want to see who the consultants that they hired. I want to see who they gave money to, people who are in that, who I am confident in that, which they will not release, that commission of inquiry. Because I know, I was fairly confident, because the governor of the central bank took Lawrence Dupre and God rest his soul, Lawrence Dupre and Andre Montai as the head of the central bank under Section 44D, and used the Bob Lindquist forensic report, which was completed while I was still in office, right? So I know some of the players, and I know some of the names that set up shell companies to hide assets that did not belong other people's money. That's why you have a set of people in Trinidad and Tobago running around, wealthy, driving all kind of cars. Not me. I inherited. Yes, I inherited. And my husband wasn't working there with the AFPA. He had passed away. Not me. Or other people's money. That's what they spend. Set up shell company. I know that as a fact. And the governor said that he used the Bob Lindquist forensic report to bring the civil suit against Andre Montai and Lawrence Dupre for millions of dollars for their mismanagement of Clico and I think CIB, and to bring them to account for that. And I believe it was successful against both of them. I do not know if they are paid a cent, because somebody whispered in my ear that Mr. Montai has not paid any money. But am I surprised? No. If that is true, I don't know. But they say he has not paid any money. He has not paid any money. So I released the commission of inquiry report. And then we will understand and start giving us audit accounts. That is not right, that we are not seeing those audited accounts. And then you come in and telling us we have how much billions more still owing. I want to see how that money is spent. We are entitled to it. It's not your money. It's not your money. It's not yours. It's the country's money. I don't know how Trinidadians and Tobagonians accept this, I don't know how we accept that kind of treatment and this kind of nonchalant, off the cuff. Oh, we still have the owing, but no details. Time to insist and give us some audited accounts, just like how they had to do for the Auditor General. Just like for the Auditor General, you're fighting and it going in November, that's going to be good. Setting up that Harris committee. No offense to Justice Harris, by the way. It's nothing. No offense to Justice Harris. That the judicial review of the Auditor General, just imagine that, and the Attorney General saying that he was not funding her defense as a public officer in charge of overseeing under the Constitution, assuring that the expenditure and revenue that is spent by the government on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago is properly accounted for. That's what her job is under the Exchequer and Audit Act and the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago, and yet we're doing as if she's wrong to ask for it. Just as how it looked like if we're wrong to ask for the CLICO audited account and they could do what they want, because that's what they do, and they do what they want. So that was part of the budget. So I'm not going off mark. He did say that the revenue they're going to generate, he's not worrying about tourism, he's not worrying about agriculture. That's just talk. Why it's just talk? He sat on there and mentioned the tourism. Now, when you look at a budget, and I was glad that they gave a definition of the budget, because a budget is not just dollars and cents. It is tied to a strategic plan, because every year for a government to be able to spend for another year, another fiscal period, they have to go to the Parliament, and the Parliament has to approve the appropriation bill and pass it, and the President has to assent it, and then it becomes law. So it is a question that you cannot run the country without money. Just how you can run your household without money. The government cannot run the country without money. And every year, at the end of the fiscal year, which is September the 30th, by that date, they must go to the Parliament to get the funding appropriation from the Parliament to be able to continue to appropriate money or take money out of the consolidated fund and put it into the various ministries and state enterprises and judicial and other entities. Has she joined us?
Yes. Now, let me interrupt you there. I got in contact with her. She had difficulties with the internet process, so I have her on the telephone.
Oh God, it sounds like a recurring decimal.
She'll tell you why. She'll tell you why.
Dira's not, Dira, good afternoon. And I'm going to say Dr. Sajoana, good afternoon. Happy to have you on, although we can't see you.
Thank you, Karen. And I want to apologize. I am the victim of a series of unfortunate events. Returned home only to discover that my electrician mistakenly cut the Wi-Fi line to the whole house. There was no electricity, and I don't know, I'm not able to get through on my phone. So I've been trying to contact you actually just minutes before. So finally we are connected. So good afternoon to you, good afternoon to your listeners, and my apologies.
Not a problem. We've been having our own little difficulties. Okay. So you are not the only one.
You know what? Whenever there is some rain in Trinidad and Tobago, our entire communication system basically, starts to act up.
Yes.
It catches up to your school.
No, but this is on previous shows. I mean, either they couldn't hear me, or I couldn't hear them, or we had to abandon one of the shows. So don't feel away about it. I have a person I call Keith Second, and he's correcting me, and I'm glad that he's joining in. Yes, his suit was brought by Central Bank and CLICO. Well, CLICO and Central Bank, it was the government, because remember, so he's correcting me. He's telling me the civil case is still going on. Gita Sakal and 3 companies are also part of that civil suit. Yeah, but you know what? I know Gita Sakal is part of it, but Gita Sakal was the secretary today. I don't want to go off on the CLICO issue. All I'm saying, I want to just end that part and turn over to our guest. Say we want to get some audited accounts, because if the minister can come and say that 13 billion, thank you, Keith Second, for correcting me, but we need to see audited accounts. And that's all I will say on that now. And let me introduce our guest, who is no stranger to anyone who has a television, who reads a newspaper, or has a radio. And that is none other than Dr. Indira Sajawan, who has her MSc, BA from UE, good, PhD from the UE again. I am a UE person myself, so I'm proud to say that. The Institute of International Relations, and the principal consultant of applied learning and solutions. And you look as your focus is on competitiveness and sustainability. And you are a member of several, have been a member of several boards, included NGC, Atlantic LNG, and we could go on and on. I never knew you had been a member of Parliament. I forgot that.
I fought a by-election when Shah Mohammed died. I was in opposition. I was under UNC, that incarnation, Mr. Pandey. I fought a by-election. I was in the Parliament until Mr. Manning called the election, and then I opted out because I felt that I needed to do a few other things before I was ready again to serve.
I understand that. So I understand that.
Yeah, you have to have some really, really good, solid experience, I believe, to bring to that particular house.
Yes. So I'm going to hand it over to you, because you had written, now that we know that I didn't want to call your name until we were definitely on the show. One of the things that prompted me to ask you to join us, and you kindly and graciously consented immediately. I was very, very happy about that. Was an article that you had written in the, published, I should say, in the Guardian newspaper, which was for a newspaper. It certainly was a very comprehensive look at various aspects of the budget. So I'm going to turn it over to you. I've spoken quite a lot, and I think now I'd like you to give your take on, well, first of all, what you understand a budget is, just a very brief understanding of it, and what did you think in a very broad brush way, and then you can get into specifics on the 2025 budget. So I hand it over to you, Dr. Sajawan.
So Karen, let me say the role of a government is to develop a country, to implement measures and programs that can grow an economy. What do we mean by that? We want an economy is growing when something called the gross national product, which is the value of goods and services that we produce, is increasing, when employment is increasing, generation of foreign exchange is increasing, quality of life is improving, things like crime, things like that are under control. That is what development is. So when we kind of look at the country and we want to judge whether we are achieving development, you want to ask yourself, is this an economy where jobs are being created? Are we growing? Are there sustainable opportunities? Are we feeling safe, etc.? And any individual because we all live here, can make that assessment on their own. Now, the government have available to it several tools in order to do this. One of the things government tend to do is develop a strategic plan, 3-year or 5-year development plan. In this instance, the government has a 2020 vision that is supposed to be the medium-term plan that the government is operating with. And the budget, the national budget, is the annual mechanism of financing that development plan. And therefore, we should be able to see, or to answer the question, when at the end of a fiscal year, after a government has spent someone close to $60 billion, we need to ask ourselves, what occurred in this year in order to move us closer to the development agenda that was outlined in the country? Yeah, and so that is kind of it in a nutshell. Unfortunately, in Trinidad and Tobago, we don't have budget accounting. What we have is year after year, the minister simply comes and tells us, all is great, all is well, and basically presents to us, how much revenue he hopes to generate in the next year, how much he intends to spend, and and how he has allocated it pretty much. And he will cherry pick some issues that he feels makes the government sound good. And this budget was no different from that. In fact, in my estimation, this budget really is the prelude to the national to the general election.
Right. But so let's get on. And I think that's a good scripture. So especially for the public, because, I think, I don't know if many people think or review. I think it's a 2030 vision. They decided, again, it's a 2030 vision. Isn't there 2030? They upgraded the 2020 to 2030. What they intend to achieve by 2030.
Karen, I wouldn't say they upgraded it. What I would say is we had a 2020 vision that was done through a tripartite type of approach where Mr. Manning led that initiative, where he really went out to the country, find his mind, created technical documents of various sectors, etc. Came up with Vision 2020. Vision 2030 is the brainchild of this particular version of the PNM. I don't think that it really links in or seeks to really simply build on the 2020 vision, because, to be honest, I've read it and I really I'm hard pressed to identify a direction. I'm hard pressed when I read it to be able to sit back and say, oh, wow, yes, I can see where this government is taking this country. It simply is not there. I will say, on the other hand, under Mr. Manning, it was very clear, by the kinds of initiatives that he was focused on. He had what was it? World class, or he had a particular catchphrase that he used, and you saw that the project that he was building was towards that. The entire Hyatt. We could talk about the Hyatt in this moment in a different light, but that entire waterfront project was a brainchild of Mr. Manning in terms of how he saw, development, where he saw the country. He has vision for dealing with the issue of congestion through the rapid rail. Obviously, the issue of cost, came heavily into fire, and we didn't go down that road. The whole concept of the aluminum smelter and all of that, the environmentalists say, well, no, they kicked up fuss, and that didn't happen. But there was a vision. You could see where the diversification thrust is going to be. In this current administration, the only thing I think we know for certain is that the love affair with the current energy sector is not something they're prepared to let go of anytime soon. And they will put all effort into that and into the negotiations with Venezuela to ensure that to try to ensure, because it's out of their control really, some variables, to ensure that there is gas flowing across border from Venezuela to Trinidad and Tobago. And they are hoping, quite optimistically, that it's going to flow in 2027. So they're telling all of us, just kind of hold fast, basically tighten your belt. It's going to be a hard couple of years until the gas starts to flow. The minister clearly said it to old age pensioners, for example. I know people are thinking, why not an increase, but I can't afford it now. But don't worry, in 2027, when it all starts to flow across the border, we can look at it again. So it's that kind of...
The problem with that, though, if I may say, is just even if... Well, there's so much we can talk about in terms of the budget, but not even looking at that. Didn't they say to us in 2018 that Shell was going to build this huge solar panel farm, so that a lot of the natural gas that was being utilized for the domestic market, which had to come first before selling it to LNG or downstream. 2018 Shell was supposed to that. Whatever became of that? What has become of nearly every single project? You see, the problem with them, and by the way, the 2027 is who is saying that? Who is saying that? At the very least, if things go well, it might be looking at 2028. But even if you're looking at 2028, let me hear, before I interject, because you said you in a way identified, if you wanted to test the health of our economy, just like how you want to test the health of a patient, There are certain indicators, regardless of whatever else is thrown at you, there are certain clear indicators that will tell you if your economy is doing well. And I would like you to address some of them, one of them being the deficit, the growth, the inflation. There are a number of indicators, and I would like, if you could, pull away all those layers and layers of talk and promises that we have heard since they came into office and have not materialized. Every year they have a different reason why. Well, they didn't talk anything about the Statistical Institute this year, and they didn't say anything about the Tukoport this year. I can't remember anything about those two this year. But generally, they give you a promise that by next year, next year never comes around. So I am putting no faith in what they say. They have put us to not have credibility, not only in their revenue numbers, their expenditure numbers, also in the lack of, as you said, you cannot see any clear strategic plan as to how all this appropriation is going to achieve the strategic objective of this government by 2030. But if you can tell us how you read, what is your pulse in relation to the health of the economy, and what are the indicators that you would tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago that they should be looking at. And good afternoon, Mr. Montano. Good afternoon, Mr. Passad. They're my loyal listeners.
So let us start with the one that we talk about all the time, growth GDP, real growth in real GDP, which means, are we producing more and more goods and services every year? As simple as that. This country suffered a decade of negative growth, which means we were producing less and less.
90%? Is that what they say? 90%? Is that what they said? I don't know why I got the figure that when you look at the negative growth, except for 2022, 1 year or so, that when you have the cumulative effect, if you took from 2016 up to 2023, that it is really, we have had negative growth, a decline in growth of almost 19%. Is that correct?
Correct, exactly. Absolutely. I didn't hear what you were saying. So yes, you are correct. And in 2022, the growth that we had wasn't because we were producing more goods and services. It was because there was a war in Ukraine, Russia, and the prices of oil and gas and petrochemicals went up. In fact, we were actually producing less. So the volume of goods we were producing declined, but the value increased because the price increased, right? So I mean, it's quite simple. So if I'm selling a gallon of oil for $50, a barrel for $50, and I'm producing 10 barrels this year. So 10 by 50, that's $500, right? But then the price doubles. So in the next period, I'm actually only producing 8. So I'm producing less than the 10, but because the price has doubled and gone to 100, I'm now winning $800. So that's kind of what happened in 2022. Okay, production fell, but the value we were getting, the money we were getting increased, and therefore we had the first year of positive growth in a long time. It was 1.3%, and much to be celebrated. In 2023, we are hearing that there was positive growth about 1.3%. But when you look at where the growth came from, in the case of the energy sector, contracted significantly by about 13%. All of the elements of the energy sector contracted. The growth took place in the non-energy sector. But Karen, we have to drill down and see where the growth in the non-energy came from. It came from trade and distribution. That's really us buying from the rest of the world and selling.
That's right.
And adding value. And no wonder the food import bill has crossed $7 billion.
That's right.
So we're not producing food and selling it to the rest of the world or even selling it to ourselves. What we are doing is we are buying. We're good traders. So in Trinidad, for me, what we have is conglomerates by distribution. Right? And celebrate these individuals. We put them up on pedestals, give them PhDs and all sorts of accolades. And the small man who's struggling and really trying to do something to take what we have in an indigenous way and add value, he's totally ignored. No.
I want to tell you, Dira, let me just do you know that first time, it was years ago, I was on a program with you, and they were talking about devaluation. And you made the point that if we devalue, we have to understand, you might think devaluation would make us more competitive, our goods more competitive. And so therefore we would maybe be able to make grow the non-energy manufacturing sector. But you made the point, and I never forgot it, and you just said it, is that what it means is, but how much of the input into those manufacturing sector, and you identify the manufacturing sector, which is distribution and retail, if they're not producing anything, how much of the input is produced, which is then using up your foreign exchange in order to bring that in. So you use that as an argument years ago, I never forgot it, as one of the arguments against devaluation, because you didn't see the benefit if most of the input into the so-called export was imported from the rest of the world and using up the foreign exchange to do that.
Right. So that, but I just want to make one correction to you. The manufacturing sector is the sector that actually they buy the inputs from the rest of the world, but they do add some amount of value, right? And then they sell. The distribution sector is different. Trade and repairs and the retail sector doesn't fall under manufacturing. That's a different category, right? That's the one that simply uses foreign exchange, earns zero. It simply demands foreign exchange. It has to very often pay out monies in foreign. So when we look at the slower franchises that we have in Trinidad and Tobago in the food industry, so when we look at the KFCs and the Pizza Huts and the NME,
you calling them out.
Yeah, these entities, these franchises, the franchise fees are paid in US currency. Most of what they use are imported, and they then sell to us. They earn TT dollars, and then the bank has to give them the foreign exchange that they need to buy the inputs, as well as to send back the franchise fees.
Yes.
Right? But they don't seem to have a problem getting access to the US dollars in order to do that. But John, individual who wants to go away for a little holiday, has to present his ticket, and when he presents his ticket, they are going for a month, all he getting is $200. And then on top of that, banking sector has now reduced the amount of US currency he can spend on his credit card, if he does have a credit card, because many just individuals don't even have a credit card.
Right.
He can't. Scotia, for example, they used to allow you to withdraw 100 US with your debit card on a daily basis. They've now cut that to $50. So the small man, one who's suffering, who paying the price. On top of that, we are paying a 7% duty when we use our credit cards in order to buy things and pay cheaper, because the government seems to be committed to forcing us to buy from the domestic retail industry that is importing the adding on a markup, and then we must pay for that. And that is not fair. It is not a model of sustainability. You talked about
equity at all. You want to, and I want to, and one point I want to make with what you all said, which I've said almost, I almost feel I'm in myself. I know what I want, because I know David has said something similar a lot, so we think alike. But the other part of what you said with the franchises, the trade and industry, why are they letting in the Chuck E. Cheeses, the how many we have rituals? Why must we have what you call it, these Starbucks all over the country? And not only that, they don't pay the salaries. I want to know what salaries are. Those are not living wage salaries they're paid. Where is the room for persons working in KFC behind the counter, right? And working for all of these franchises. And this country has no money, with a food bill of over 7.3 billion. And the central bank only a few years ago said our food bill was 5 billion. In a matter of years, 3 or 4 years, no more than 3 or 4 years, because I remember it very well. It went up to 7.3 billion. Why is the Ministry of Trade and Industry and this government allowing our limited foreign exchange to be used for franchises that add to health issues, the non-communicable diseases, which is why health has such a large budget, right? Because it's diabetes, it's heart diseases. All of these things have a lot to do with your diet, allowing them in the country, popping up all over. Everyone that you can find in America, you can find in this country. Yet people cannot have a living wage, cannot make a living wage. And these people working in these franchises, where is there for them to go? Nowhere. And using up our foreign exchange. Why is this government allowing that? You have made the point. The only thing I added is that the people working in there, except maybe the managers and the owners, are the only people who really benefit, and the country does not benefit. Yes, what happens is we get sick.
So, Karen, that's the model of development. That's what diversification looks like in Trinidad and Tobago. Diversification it doesn't mean that we are. I mean, we have quite a wonderful indigenous, food industry based on what we produce locally. But we basically crowding it out. And when we say crowding, I mean we are providing we are causing them to face competition that is very stiff, that is imported. And we're people, we look at cable, etc., and what we see the rest of the world eating, we kind of want to consume, and it's a problem. You talk about the use of foreign exchange. I mean, the latest one I hear, and I mean, I'm aghast, and I can't, I'm in such shock that we are now importing pumpkins, Halloween pumpkins. We always scared foreign exchange could be allocated to put in. Yes, going to the bigger, I won't call names, so I won't get nobody into trouble. Go into, and one of the places where you need a membership to go and shop, and I understand you get $100 for the pumpkin. Okay, and that is obscene, Karen. It is obscene. That is not.
I do agree with you.
Not what. And our scarce foreign exchange is being used for that at a time when, I mean, it is real. Anyway, we were talking, you asked me about some GDP.
Yeah, so let's deal with the foreign exchange then. Yeah. I could use it from the foreign exchange from 2014 to the date, and how much debt is attached to that foreign exchange that's by floating bonds to use for recurrent expenditure. I want you to address, because I saw somebody, I didn't read the story. They said if we continue with these, the fiscal deficits, let me not go on the fiscal deficits, we are dealing with the foreign exchange. Let me hear you speak a little bit about the foreign exchange and how much foreign exchange do we really have when that foreign exchange is tied up with bond, with debt.
Well, the foreign exchange is the reserve that the central bank holds, right? It holds that amount of reserve, and it dips into that in order to be able to stabilize the exchange rate. Now, Karen, you talk about a few years ago when you would have heard me, and I would have been very much on the point of view that I didn't think that we should devalue the currency. If you ask me the same question now in this moment, I have to tell you that I have changed, and I have changed because the circumstances of this country have changed. It is still going to be by and large devastating, but what we are doing right now is we are costing at the black market for rate. So even though some people are lucky enough to be able to access foreign exchange in the bank at the 678, the majority of persons are accessing it at the black market rate, which is about $7.50, $7.75. And even those who are getting it at the $6.70 are not pricing their goods as if they are paying that. They are pricing their goods as if they are paying the black market rate.
That's true.
The Minister of Finance is only playing, I don't know what he's playing at in terms of trying to say he's protecting the value of the currency, because that's hogwash. The black market rate is what we are functioning at. Mm-hmm. So at the very least, you should allow the currency to go to that level. That what it would mean is it would free up things. People might be able. It will shrink demand to some extent. It will allow us to be able to breathe a little bit.
But what about the effect it would have on our export market? Because if the devaluation would help. It would help because yes, it would help. But I wanted to ask you about the deficits too.
Let me just come to it. But the point I'm making is that it may not in this moment have any significant effect because those export companies that are producing are buying it at the black market already. Mm-hmm. Understand the point I'm making? So the goods is already being using that black market rate. So it is not the 678. It is the $7.50 or $7.85 or $8 that is being used. So in it to me it's not
Reality.
right. It balances off itself, and we have to become more realistic. And that's why the IMF keeps calling for that. Now you talk about debt. Let's talk about debt for a minute. Our debt to GDP ratio means is about 71 to 73%. What that
That's
means is that at this moment in time, if we were to have to clear out all the debt that is owed by the government, whether it is to domestic institutions, whether it is to individuals who have bought bonds, whether it is to foreign financial institutions, we require 3/4 of our GDP in order to clear that. Which just
And
leaves
the
us with
GDP is the
25%.
goods and services produced in a fiscal year. Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Right.
And that
The
is a
value
very
of the goods and services. Mhm.
yeah, more than that, Karen, debt servicing. So debt servicing is the amount of money that you will spend in order simply to service the debt. You know, like when you buy a house and you borrow $1 million, but every month you're only paying a certain amount of thousands of dollars. Just to service the government's debt requires approximately 30% of the annual budget. 30%. Now they don't spend 30%. They don't actually spend it because they keep pushing the debt by rescheduling and doing all kinds of creative things. The government is able not to be paying that amount, but that is what is required.
But I want you to address the issue that I brought up. So to clarify it for the audience and anybody listening, the point that other economists have made, I think I could call one of the because he has been on record as saying it, Dr. Arjun, Valmiki Arjun. The fact he said that if you were to take away from the foreign exchange, which went from 10 point something billion in September 2014 to now to about 5.3 billion. He gave it a little punch up in July, but in August it went back down to 5.3 billion. He said that if you could take away the monies that are tied up in these bonds that are US bonds and had to pay, and you look at the debt cumulative effect of the debt which those bonds represent, most of the what we call our foreign exchange is really tied up in debt. Is that correct?
Okay, I don't want to comment on something that I've not actually myself gone and done the research on. Okay. For me, it is scary enough that the reserve that is held in the central bank only represents, I think at this moment in time, it's about 7 months of import cover. Yeah. And while by international standard, there's the argument, well, that's all right. It's not too bad. 7 months is not too bad. But that could be wiped out very quickly. Now, some other things we need to take into consideration is the fact that the minister talked about the fact that the monies in the heritage and stabilization grew, even though he was it grew from 5 point something billion to about 6 point something billion. And the issue though is that it didn't grow because the government was putting more money into that fund. It grew because the fund is being managed, apparently, and we have kudos to the management team. It's been managed well enough that the returns on the investment is what pushed the value up. And again, we are getting these figures from the government, from the Minister of Finance, and we have to make the assumption that these figures are in fact correct. And
can I say something on that before? Because the reason, I just want to comment on that heritage stabilization fund. The reason being that the opposition leader said that they never withdrew any money from the HSF. And one of the arguments that they put forward for why he puts the revenue prices of oil and gas high is because once it's more than 10% of your budgeted amount, you have to deposit 60% of the excess into the HSF. But she was right. If you go to the Ministry of Finance, their own website, and the annual review of the HSF and the statement from the chairman, from 2016, they withdrew US, everything is in US, 375 million. 2017, 252.5 million. In 2020 and 2020, which is the COVID type period, 979.9 million, 892.7 million. In 2023, December 2023, 160.3 million. And when I totaled up all the amount, and I used multiply by 670, not 678, it came up to from 2016 to 2023. TT $18 billion that was withdrawn by this government from the HSF. Now, the only reason I am particularly bringing that up because I think the HSF now has 6.1 billion, and that is an investment vehicle. And there's a statement from Hewitt Williams, in the forward as chairman, talking about his concern about the number of withdrawals. In 1 year, they had 9 withdrawals, one of which went into the consolidated fund, and no explanation was given. And he said that if they continue like that, the whole heritage component of the thing, I am paraphrasing, but he was very strong in his language, that the future generations would not get the benefit of it. And if they had not, and I think, this is my view, I don't know what your view is, I think that Standard & Poor's and all these sovereign wealth funds or agencies who over monetary, IMF, etc., feel that we have borrowed as much as we can, and people and bondholders lend us not because they have confidence in our economy so much, but they have a guarantee by the HSF. They know the HSF is there and can pay them back their money. And I think the Minister of Finance, with all due respect, one of the reasons, even before the pre-budget statement, I said that the natural gas was going to be $3.50. I was 9 cents off. But you know why I said that? And I might be wrong. I said it because he has made up his mind, the Standard & Poor's, he said it in his Revenue Authority statement, that they're saying if you keep on with these fiscal deficits, these huge gaps between revenue and expenditure, we are going to downgrade you from BBB minus, and that will be junk bond status when you go non-investment grade status. And I think his attitude is that he amended the HSF in when they had the COVID to allow the government to withdraw from the HSF for contagious diseases under the public health, which is understandable. If you have a major natural disaster, but if there's a precipitous decline in the revenues in the country, and it also allows them to withdraw as much as 1.5 billion US from the HSF under Section 15E. So my view, one of the reasons why he put a realistic figure to that natural gas, which he never did before. Last year it was $5, the year before $6. Yeah. So he knew it wasn't making sense. I feel he did that because he doesn't want to have to borrow as much. He's using the HSF as a mechanism, not only as a guarantee to the bondholders that we already have, but also to withdraw money, which is not debt, withdraw money to finance recurrent expenditure instead of taking out bonds to do that. So that Standard & Poor's and IMF and all of them will not come down harder on Trinidad and Tobago for 9 out of 10 fiscal deficits of this government, except for 2022, because of that war. That is my take on why he went to 359. I said 350 before he gave the number, and that is what I think. He doesn't want to take on much more debt. He prefers to take that heritage fund and utilize it and withdraw from it, not to go and diversify the economy, not to do that, but to pay off recurrent expenditure, wages and salaries, transfers and subsidies. That is what he's using the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. And if he hadn't done that, that Heritage and Stabilization Fund would probably have now 10 billion US in it. That's my
You're very correct. This is the first government that has, in fact, tapped into the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. For a very long time, there's been debate over the fact that, we shouldn't have a combined fund. We should separate it. We should have a separate heritage and a separate stabilization fund. Because we're an oil and gas economy, because we're dependent on a commodity where the price tends to be determined in the international market, tends to be volatile, there is the element of the heritage fund that allows the government to be able to tap into it for the reasons that you have put forward. Natural disaster, you need to be able to meet your expenditure and your revenue falls short because of something you can't. But it's just one thing I want to say to you: for the minister to be able to tap into it. I know he did premise the budget on a more realistic price of natural gas relative to last year, but he actually realized last year a price on average that was even much less than what he budgeted for this year. Because in order to tap into it, he had to have a situation where the actual price is less than 10% of the budgeted price. So he had to overprice. He must overprice oil and gas if he wants to be able to tap into it. So that when the actual price comes in 10% lower than the budgeted price, that is the mechanism that is triggered to allow him to tap into it.
But
So
in
if
Tira,
the price is like that, then he can't tap into the fund.
but no, in Tira, let me just say this. My understanding is that 10% and that 6% is deposited. In other words, in order not to have to deposit into the account, into the Heritage Stabilization Fund, they made an amendment to the Heritage Stabilization Act by Section 15A, and it says that you can withdraw for these following reasons, and one of them is a precipitous decline in your revenue position. That is a ground for withdrawing. The deposit part that's why he put that's why he would always put the natural gas prices high, because he didn't want to have to deposit any money into the HSF. But now that the HSF, as you say, whoever's managing it is doing a good job, they made an amendment that gives him 3 different grounds. One of them is, and it's very broad, precipitous decline. What in heaven's name does that mean? And that is what he has been doing.
So are you saying to me they removed completely the restriction that stated that the actual price had to be had to fall below the 10% of the budget?
Yes, he did not. He said, well, I wish I could find the amendment.
I stand corrected.
Okay.
I was not there on that.
I'm gonna look for it. But my understanding is that's why he's been withdrawing every single year. He's been withdrawing every single year, even when there's no deposit, but withdrawals. Why is he not depositing and withdrawing?
But remember, he doesn't need. Okay, so my understanding, and I'm not, because I have not read that amendment that you spoke about. But what I do know is that the very fact of the over budgeting meant that he can't tap into it once the price fell below 10%. Of what he budgeted, and that is a reason why it's the
amendment changed that. When the amendment,
I take your point, and I don't disagree, and I also agree with you that in fact the minister did indicate in terms of the deficit. Now, one of the things the minister didn't speak, and usually he will indicate what the deficit for the previous year is. Note he did not. And in media review,
Auditor General.
It's actually, if you go and you read the documents, because if you go and read the review of the economy, you will see that he's projected the deficit, and the jury is not out yet because the year is not done. He anticipates that it will be upward of $7 billion. When he
Could I just say on that? That I went to the review of the economy, and for 2024. It's 2024, right? And it says in the review of the economy that up to when he had done the mid-year review, he knew that it was no longer going to be 5.1 billion, which is what he had projected, but it was going to be in the vicinity of 9-point-something billion dollars. And what he did is he reduced the revenue numbers and he reduced the expenditure numbers so that the deficit would no longer be 9 billion, but it is projected to be about 7-point-something billion, because he went and reduced the revenue and he reduced the expenditure.
Yes, the expenditure is reduced about 59 to 57.
Right.
And the revenue went from about 54 to
it wasn't much on different thing.
57 about 54. Yeah, so he did. That is in fact true, which is really about being creative with numbers.
No, you know
With
what it's about? You know what it's about? You know what it's about, Indira? Sorry to cut you, but you know what it's about? They can't trust anything he tells you about what the revenue numbers are. How you getting that deficit wrong every single day, and especially on the revenue side. When if we are energy economy, which he said in his TTRA, witness statement, when he said that we are an energy economy, it's not only the price, it's price and production. You know, for the last how many years, at least 2019, that we have a shortage of 1.4 billion cubic feet of natural gas necessary for the LNG and downstream. So you know that since 2019. Yet you're living in La La Land and putting the natural gas. Last year, you know what he did? Last year when he put it, he said, well, I'm not putting it at $6 this year. That is 2023. Not $6, put in at $5, but no explanation for it. I read the budget over and over again, right? So he put it at $5, but no explanation as to why he put it at $5. And in the face, I know they use a weighted average, or however they work out the weighted average. But when you look at the price of natural gas trading for the entire 2023 going into 2024, it never really crossed $3. It was in 250. So where did you get that figure from?
And every year when the budget is read, people like myself, like yourself, we question these things. We ask these questions, but we really don't get much answer. So, but you are correct. In my view, he does, because he said in the budget in terms of how he's going to get the deficit. Now, he didn't identify the HSF on this occasion, but he did say he's going to get it from. He's going to get $4 billion.
Peaceful assets.
Yeah. Right, basically Kiko, exactly. In fact, and he did even go so far as to say the sale of Kiko is what he's going to use, that money he's going to use in order to shore up his budget for the next couple of years until 2027. And then by the time he pull out his number, which is $13 billion, however he got it, is telling us that is, that's money that he's hoping to be able to use for that purpose. So we are in a difficult time, Karen. We are in a challenging time, and we are not being led by a government that seems to be wearing anything but blinkers, or blinders, rather. Which one it is? They're operating, with this narrow perspective, focused only on Venezuela and the dragon. And
I'd like to talk about that too. I'd like us to talk about that too. I just wanted to tell you, I went and looked up the Heritage Stabilization Amendment Act of 9 of 2020, Section 15A, which said, notwithstanding Section 15 and any other written law, and subject to subsection 2, withdrawals may be made from a fund where A disaster area is declared under the Disaster Measures Act, B, a dangerous infectious disease is declared under the Public Health Ordinance, or there is or is likely to be a precipitous decline in budgeted revenues, which are based on the production of price of crude oil or natural gas. And 2 says, subsection 1, 15.1, 2 says, withdrawals under subsection 1 may be made from the fund not exceeding $1.5 billion at any time. Is US dollars, because it's all in US funds during the financial year. Yeah, so that's what's given him. That's what he's using as a guarantee for all them loans, because he has borrowed so much on the international market. The bondholders are looking at the HSF as their guarantee, and he's looking at the HSF because he has been withdrawing over 18 billion since 2016. He has withdrawn, and I'm taking into account COVID, but he keeps on withdrawing and using it for recurrent expenditure. What am I going to think about how the HSF is being used by this minister?
That is true, because there's no accountability for it at the end of the day. When you withdraw money from something like an HSF, okay, COVID, I think, was a special case, and we can say, okay, yes, we can understand that particular withdrawal. But basically, what we should be doing with that money is we should be engaged in capital investment, in investment that is going to grow the economy, that's going to create jobs, create opportunities for generating foreign exchange, because that money has come from the monetization of our non-renewable assets, which is going to come finish. And I mean, look, we are living now the reality of it finishing. And what happens as we go forward if we do nothing to grow alternative sectors in the economy,
Well,
which
not according to
is
the Minister of Energy, because I read the review of the economy of 2024, and I mean, a lot of what they say. This is my concern. I don't know what you think about it, but um, you know, I think the difficulty with this government will among this, and I genuinely mean this. If you know from the very beginning, and you say it every year, that we are an energy economy that is subject to volatility, not only of price but production. And we have deficit of over 1.4, 1.5 billion cubic feet per day of natural gas to feed both the downstream and the LNG markets. If you know that and you keep saying that to us year in, year out, year in, year out, does it not stand to reason that you would then look at other streams to earn foreign exchange, and you would also limit the use of your foreign exchange, and if it is used, utilize it for productive rather than for retail purposes, which brings no benefit to the country in these difficult periods? This is what I do not understand. The crystal ball was in front of them. Eusina Gonzalez was in front of them. And yet, with all of that knowledge, and I have real problems with the Minister of Energy. I will, in this regard, a license from Venezuela means nothing. Sorry to say that. The 30-year license means nothing. What means something is America, the Office of Fixed Assets Control. That's what means something. And they will not, they have only given us 2 years to be able to buy the natural gas from the Dragon Field and from Lauren, if they were to develop it, with cash, with fiat, until next year. And Shell did not sign off on the final investment decision on the Dragon Field, and these nearly come to an end. You know why? Because America is not going to help Venezuela to have access to U.S. currency when America has used as their tool of trade, their weapon of trade against a non-conforming government. They have used sanctions, and they have sanctioned Venezuela. I'm not saying it right or wrong. They sanctioned Venezuela, blocked them from having access to over 90 billion US in banks abroad, not being able to access a SWIFT code. You think America, now that the man who they say won the election, Gonzalez, run off to Spain, and Maduro running the country, you think that America is going to, and Shell has not signed, and they will not sign off. The only thing they sign off on was with the manatee, which is in our waters, which have nothing to do with the Venezuela or America. So why stop telling me about Dragon Field? That is not realistic. Lauren is not realistic. That is not realistic. It is not realistic to keep telling us about something where America stands between you and Venezuela. I do not understand why he keeps talking about it.
I totally agree with all that you've said, but it's not just that America stands between you and it. The very government of Venezuela that could change its mind at any moment in time, because it is a government that will do whatever it feels like whenever it feels like. You are negotiating the future. You are betting the future of our country on a regime that is at best, and I'm trying to be gentle, unstable, unpredictable. That is a scary thing, so that you will expect us to believe that all will be you have no control over what Maduro does, what he does today, what he does tomorrow. He could get up, take a yawn one morning, and decide, you know what, I really don't feel like Trinidad and Tobago, and that's the end of you. That is the reality of the kind of administration you're dealing with. And then on top of that, let us pray very hard that it does happen, that all is well, that America allows us to, and it all goes well, and in 2027 we do have that cross-border gas coming in. But all that can do is potentially, at the very least, at the very most, actually, is to maintain the current infrastructure of demand. The LNG plants and the petrochemical plants that we currently have, there is no basis for growth and expansion.
And it's not only that, I had Dr. Justin Ram on one time, and his father worked as a cartographer, which is mapping, anyhow, in the petrotrin. And what he says, first of all, who gets first dibs is after the domestic market, TNTech and so on, is the LNG. And LNG, he says, it's like giving away, because it's like selling cocoa instead of chocolate. The petrochemicals is where the revenue is then generated. That is where we make the money.
We're adding value. Yeah, because that's where we're moving up the value chain. We're adding value to
where
our
the revenue is. So, I mean, what I'm saying is that, however I look at this thing, I think the government is being obfuscating. It's not being credible. I think Minister of Stuart Young has really put his whole reputation and his whole everything into reviving and restarting the energy sector and making it a success. But the fact of the matter is, ENI and Repsol are operating already in Venezuela. There are plenty of people operating in Venezuela. Iraq is building the largest refinery. That's why BRICS is committed to de-dollarization. Iraq or Iran? I always mix them up, building the largest refinery in Venezuela, as well as rehabilitating the one that is already, one of the refineries is already there. So Venezuela does not need us. That's what I am saying. So you say they go to the highest bidder. They do not need us. And what Shell does not need, because they are Shell shareholders, will not do, neither will BP do it. That's why they went with the Cosina, the cross-border, the one in Trinidad. They took that one. They will not interfere with anything that OFAC, which is the body in America, that is laying down the law for everybody. So you could get as much license as you want. I don't even have 30 licenses to different countries. And by the way, they publish in the Gazette in Venezuela, and Reuters or one of them published it, and then I think it got published here. Out of the gas that is exploited out of Dragonfield, 45% of the gross receipts must go to Venezuela. I want to know what investment that is in their Gazette. It was in the Venezuelan Gazette. Listen, you know what? What I am saying is that energy sector, it's just a la-la land. It's the la-la land of the Toca Port. It's the la-la land of the Statistical Institute. It's la-la land of so many things that they've told us for the last 9 years, and we keep on believing it. I don't know why, but we keep on believing it.
But I say again, let's look at the data. Let's look at the rate at which brain drain is taking place in this country. Amount of young people who can't find jobs, who are leaving in droves. Not just our young professionals, but individuals with deep experience are leaving because of quality of life. Let us look at crime and what is happening with crime and our sense of safety and our sense of security. All of these things are important things that the government needs to be focused on, and it's not. Let's look at tourism. Tourism continues not to be performing where it needs to. All our sister islands, tourism is booming. They have reached, in some instances by now, they probably have surpassed 2019 levels. There are no issues of foreign exchange shortages or any of those things, unless they are hit by natural disasters. They are doing very well. Where is our tourism? What is even our tourism product? We don't even know.
That is what I don't understand. And you know what we said in the budget? We are taking a targeted, branded approach. So I look to see how much he appropriates tourism. And by the way, tourist arrival, which includes our people coming home for holidays, and therefore they stay in my family, right? And not in hotels. A lot of them. CSO figures show on average for how many years it has never crossed more than 450,000 people. Sometimes it went down with COVID. It was really bad, obviously, but it was really bad. And you build an airport to accommodate 3 million visitors when we don't even, and that is more than twice the population of Trinidad and Tobago. Why did you agree to such a contract with Rail? I think it's Rail, the one ever Chinese company, to build a airport to accommodate 3 million? It's just like the 5,500 houses that you were going to build until the Freedom of Information Act came and they got a copy of the contract, and they had to one time they had to scrap it because it was so egregious and so much against our interests. And by the way, the framework agreement was signed when your prime minister, our prime minister, was Minister of Housing for about 9 months and moved the Minister of Housing from the Ministry of Housing to Tourism, where he still is, stayed in that ministry for 9 months. And in that period of 9 months, the framework agreement to build that 5,500 houses, which was so egregious on every possible level that he said he didn't know anything about it. Had big thing in Hyatt when they signed the agreement until they went and bust the mark, and he had to scrap it. Just like how he had to scrap the other one for 550 houses in San Fernando. Now the procurement legislation has been passed more or less fully. RFP, Mr. NH Elias came out and said, well, I wonder if the company, the Chinese company that has been awarded this contract, whether they have complied with the request for proposal requirements. And all of a sudden, they scrapped that. You didn't hear another word. What do you say when you hear these things? You have no credibility in what this government tells you, including the price of gas, the price of oil, the production level, when you will get the production, when the TTRA will start, when the property tax tribunal will be implemented. There's so many things about that property tax legislation that is one thing. The TTRA, there are problems with that. You cannot put your head on a block for anything that they tell you. But what you have to look at is the macroeconomic indicators that show that we have run 9 out of 10 fiscal deficits. What about the the borrowing rate from the central bank is 3.50, and the reserve requirement and the unemployment. We were talking about the unemployment. Let's talk a little bit about that unemployment rate, because that is even misleading too. Because you have to look at the forced participation rate.
Correct, exactly. So we have a official unemployment rate that hovers maybe about, according to the government now, about 4%, right? But I think people have to ask themselves, is this what I'm living? Is this what I'm seeing around me? Am I seeing persons who are wanting a job, able to go there and find it very easily? And the answer is no, especially amongst young people. So that in itself, in my view, is the first indicator to tell you something is wrong with that. But let's set it aside. Let us accept it for what it is. There is the issue of the labor force participation rate, which is quite low. It is about, I think, about 54%. So about 54% of individuals who are who fall into that age bracket that constitutes our labor force between, I think, 15 and, is it 60?
Yeah. 16 to 60,
yeah. So 54% of these individuals are disenchanted, have simply chosen not to be actively looking for jobs. That is what that means. And that is that is a very worrying thing. So when you're boasting of this high or low unemployment figure, you are saying nothing about the labor force participation rate. That is the first thing. And then the second thing, if we drill down into the figure itself, you will see that the rate of unemployment among young people and among persons who are supposed to be at their most productive age in their late 30s and 40s, this is where the highest, where the unemployment rate far surpasses this official rate of 4.5%.
Exactly. And I want to ask you, I'm asking actually because I do know this has also troubled me too. Minimum wage, which is another, that is definitely for a budget, as a budget thing, right? As a budget strategy. But
you mean an election strategy?
About unemployed. A person could be deemed to be, this is one of the things that they fight in all the Latin American countries. I see in England too, they're doing that with the doctors. They say we want an inflation protecting wage, because if I could use the example that I know in England as by way of an example, for doctors there have not gotten an increase in 10 years, but the cost of living and inflation has eroded the whatever salary they were making in 10 years ago. And so they got a 22% increase, but the 22% increase doesn't even begin to answer the question that they still are working for less than they worked for 10 years ago because of the inflationary impact and the cost of living impact on their salaries. So what I want to ask you really, when they tell me the labor force participation rate is a point, and of course we have to acknowledge that a lot of people may be in school too, because if they're in 16, so you might be still in school or go to university, that is true. But are you considered employed if, and which is what they do, if in a 5-day week, they'd say, well, listen, I can't afford to hire you for 5 days at the minimum wage, so you're giving you 2 days work. But will you still be counted as employed? Because I don't think I think you must make a distinction between a living wage employment, because there's no point you telling me I am employed and I cannot afford to buy food or pay for transportation for myself, much less my child. That is very misleading to tell me that unemployment rate is so low, when in reality, if I disaggregate it, it is really a lot of people, as you say, living in poverty. I don't know if you said that.
If what you have described, Karen, in terms of, okay, somebody is fully employed if they're working, 40 hours a week or whatever, and what happens if somebody's working less than that? And it is we factor it in as somebody's employed, because we're very simplistic in terms of how we gather data on unemployment, all right? Because there's this notion of underemployment as well, where it is not just, so I might be working the number of hours for the week, but my certification suggests that I should be earning $10,000 a month, but I'm only earning $5,000 a month. So that I'm basically, or I should be holding a job that is maybe at a introductory management level, but I'm actually performing as a clerical person. So I'm underemployed. I am employed below the level at which I am trained to do. And again, that is an indication of a country that is not developing in a sustainable manner, that is not going to be competitive if we are underemploying our human resource. And the only way we can change that, Karen, is if we are growing the economy, is we're pushing the production frontier outwards, and we are allowing for the creation of new opportunities. We are allowing the opportunity for those who are employed to be able to see opportunity to get into a higher paying position, or even in the current position you are in, being able to see that your wage or your salary can go up. I mean, look how long there's been, unresolved wage negotiations within the public sector in this country. I mean, the Minister of Finance presented this 5% to whichever trade union will take it in the 2025 budget, as if he's doing people a huge
public
favor.
sector only, yeah?
The inflation rate post-COVID into following the Ukraine-Russia war reached double-digit figures. So that proposed wage increase that you are given to people in no way rewards them for what they have lost for all of those years where prices were rising and their purchasing power were declining. But not only was that happening, when the government found itself increasingly in a position where its revenue stream from the energy sector was contracting, it then looked at the issue of subsidies to the masses, and it then started to cut that. So whereas our husband and wife, some parents would be planning their lives around the fact that, okay, I don't really need to worry about education too much, university, my child is about to start because there's gates. And I am guaranteed that, gates will be offered to them. And then suddenly they wake up just before their child is about to start, to be told, well, sorry, but gate is now means tested. So if your salary combines over $10,000, you have to pay whatever percent. You only get in 25%. Now they have to find that money. to fill that.
And I'm not taking into account that you're already not working for 10,000, because I understand if you take the inflation, that is the cost of living and inflation from, you go back to 2016 as the year starting period, we have inflation has eaten away at our purchasing power by, I don't want to give you wrong figures. I think one figure was given at 21% by IMF for 2019 to 20 for a short period, but all it comes back to is you're already not working for $10,000. So when they put in that policy 5 years ago, maybe you were working for $10,000. And today, you know what you're working for? Maybe it's $7,000. And yet and then you're testing me to say that I do not qualify for GATE when my salary in purchasing power, which is what, that's what it is now 7,000 instead of 10,000.
So it might be that I'm taking home paper value is that it's on the face value telling me $10,000. But when I go to pay what I have to pay, the amount I'm able to buy with that equals to when I only had $7,000. And that's the point you're trying to make. And I just want to reinforce that. And you are very correct. And there was not only just not just this. Then the minister said, okay, well, we no longer can support gas subsidy, so we're going to cut that. So again, people had to dip into their shrinking pockets because inflation is already eating away at it, and they then had to find out of it. They had to readjust how they spend their money in order to be able to have more money to meet the needs of the pump. Right?
How do you then explain? Because I want you to explain it. Because now they say the inflation is now in 2024, 0.4%, 0.5%. But that's year on year. So people, when you put, and is an inflation rate of 0.5% really a good thing when your economy has gone into the decline? Is that a good figure? What is it saying?
Karen, you don't want them to, because then you could go into stagflation and deflation. Exactly. That is not a good thing for an economy at all. An economy ideally needs an inflation rate that is between maybe about 2 to 3%, right, because inflation acts as an incentive to investors to invest. Exactly. Because it allows them how they could grow their money. If inflation is at this very, very low level, that is a disincentive. That is not a good thing. So when I hear the minister read this out as if in the budget, as if it is a great thing, it is not a great thing. So that's one thing. But the other thing is people need to understand is that even though the inflation rate might be decreasing, it doesn't mean that prices are coming down. What it means is that the rate at which prices are increasing is slowing down.
Okay, I just want to say, Oscar Daniel, because we get these little comments, and I like to say, Haley Kulcha has, they're talking about the refinery thing, I think. No, they're not talking about refinery. My eyesight is so bad. And someone else, I won't repeat it, what he said, but it was a compliment, which I'll leave it alone. But at the end of the day, when you look, and this is why you are the economist, I am not the economist at all, but I think if I go to a doctor, I want to know how healthy I am. And I am going to use some indicators. And when you see the fiscal deficits, I saw they said, if we continue, it's going to destroy the country. I would like you to really comment on that, because I guess they're trying to say where we're going to find the money to fill the gap between the expenditure and the revenue. And the central bank has said that a lot of the problem is the VAT returns, 2.5 billion outstanding in VAT returns, and also delays in paying contractors. They get the receipts, but they're not paying them because they delaying the expenditure. So giving a false narrative of what the expenditure position really is. So you look at the repo rate. That's what I was trying to remember. You stuck at that repo rate. The reserve requirement, you drop the reserve requirement. The foreign exchange and cut by half, and it covered with a set of bond borrowing. The HSF, you've dipped it how many times? 9 times during the COVID. But up to $18 billion you have withdrawn from the HSF to fund recurrent expenditure. You have done nothing to have any capital revenue except selling CRICO assets. That is what your claim to fame is, selling off CRICO assets. That's your idea of production. And then you look at all of those factors, growth, and then revenue is not the same thing as the GDP. The transfer pricing, since I was there, I talk about it. They talk about transfer pricing again and again and again in order to get the revenue that is so badly needed from the multinational corporations. Let me see when that will ever materialize. That same minister in his second budget or first budget said we are the country with the largest number of private members clubs, meaning casinos in the world per capita. And up to now, they will not fully implement, operationalize the Gaming and Gambling Commission Act. Up to now, the TTRA will not be operationalized because there's an issue with the enforcement that came up in the Privy Council, which they have to address. Property tax, the tribunal that was supposed to replace the tax appeal board, they set it up. They said they were not going to send over the valuation rule. It is an Evaluation Amendment Act for residential property until they reach the 50% mark. They did not reach it according to the minister in the ministry. They did not reach the 50% mark, telling me that I have to pay my property tax by September 30th because that's the last year or the fiscal year. So you're trying to get some revenue. If you went to the Privy Council, you would have lost. You cannot pressure people and send them a bill a week before, have them lining up, and you talk about digitalization. Give me a break. Right? I'm talking, where's the Toko port? You talk about tourism. I didn't see any money for tourism. You talk about agriculture. You're giving them less money for agriculture than you gave them last year and the year before. I am so disgusted with this government and people sitting on there and putting their head in the sand because they prefer not to face the reality that this government must know, because I was in government as Minister of Finance. You cannot tell me the TTIFC has been reduced a fintech hub. That's what you have reduced it to, and we had someone from, I said it already, and I said it before, a guy from Ireland who worked in one of the big audit companies, actually drafting our legislation for a TTIFC model, either on the Irish or the Dubai model. What have they brought to this? What have they done? Everything. They have not implemented it, or they have implemented it badly. Implemented it badly. Ask for crime. You talk about crime. Did you not see that the head of the Coast Guard, Daniel, said that now they're saying the 2 hostile boats are down. 4 out of the 14 OPVs are down. The Air Guard has been dismantled. The scanners 4 out of 5 were not working. I don't think they have a scanner down in Point Lisas at all. And the only one that's working in Port of Spain is the one the Americans put. The 19 bays to do the manual check for what's coming in those containers. Only 3 out of 90, according to the acting controller of accounts when she went at the JCC to speak. And they know, everybody knows it is transnational crime that is controlling this country. What are they telling you now? Because the procurement regulator does not have oversight over national security matters, you're buying more cars, you're buying more OPVs. That's your answer, putting more feet on the ground, employing more people. Who is benefiting from that? You're doing, and everybody knows, if you talk to them quietly, that they know at the major cause of our crime, not the only cause, but the major cause is the transnational operations in the cocaine and unlicensed guns. Over 80% of the murders are with unlicensed guns, the proliferation of gangs, the 6s and 7s. What other information do you need to be put in your face to deal with the crime, which is the cause of the crime, but you won't deal with it, and you know why. And we all know why. We all are afraid to say it, but we all know why. And it is a disgrace of our government. That's what it is. I'm not saying this is the only government, but you're the government, you're in charge, you're making policy, and you're making the laws. That's who you are. That's your position. So I have to address you and not any other opposition. They are not in government. Everybody knows that is the major cause of the crime. Yet you're pretending like you don't know, and you want to buy more. Who gets any contracts for those OPVs? Who gets any contracts for the cars and mashing up, and you have a car cemetery with cars upon cars upon cars just mash up because they're not made for our rugged roads or the type of work. Who is getting those contracts? The thousands of young men sitting down in remand. Thousands of them. And when you are in remand, they have not determined whether or not you should stand trial, That young man, Akili Charles, spent 10 years of his life in remand, and they said that the police didn't have enough evidence against him with that bail act situation. I mean, what are you going to do with a government that does not deliver, does not do anything to deal with other revenue streams in a serious way, like tourism and talk about farm to table? Just a set of old talk. But what I look at is the appropriation, right? Just a set of old talk, and coming back and telling us transfer pricing. You're going to pass the legislation. You're going to implement it. You're going to implement the gambling. And that property tax is a lot of trouble because you're not supposed to put it in the consolidated fund. It's supposed to go for residential purposes. It's supposed to go to the, but you haven't set up the fund as yet.
Exactly.
And the last one I want to say, you're talking about know your wealth, something of wealth. 2019 in legislation, but you have not operationalized it. Similarly, campaign financing in legislation is there. It's built on the Jamaican model. I had MSG, David Abdullah on, and we went through it. Why haven't you set up the registry for campaign financing? Because you want your campaign financed, and there's a price that is paid by those who finance your campaign. Who do you think we are? We are living in a situation. I don't want anybody to do anything to me. If you all see anything happen to me, I not on anybody nobody paying me anything, and I don't want any appointment from them. And they know that. And they have nothing on me, because if they had something on me, I would not be able to say what I say. They would have destroyed me long time. That is why they will not release the commission of inquiry into CLF, because it would clear my name and all their friends that they have supporting them and acting as campaign managers for some of their ministers. They would be exposed in that which was set up by the opposition, by the way. So they were not doing it in love for me. They did not do it for love for me. Why don't you release it? Because as long as you leave that over my head, you have it hanging over my head. But I can speak out, and I can speak out, because this government is a complete failure, a sham, and a disgrace to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I said enough. Sorry, Indira, but that's so much. I feel you'd go for the rest of this. It's only have 4 minutes, so God, sorry.
I feel your passion. I feel that. When you listen to the budget, and you are the minister again talk about the issue of diversification, right? Diversifying the economy. But it's a new model for diversifying economy that it is put forward, these special economic zones. But the minister, what he's simply done, we used to have these free zones, and we had these industrial estates, and he's now taken all of it and lumped it and given it all a new name. That's all he has done.
It's true. I noticed that, Yes.
Yeah, and that is the new strategy for economic diversification, with the exception of two. They are not designated or specialized zones that you have created. So that anybody wants to come and do anything could come in, with the exception of the Maruga one. I think that is probably for agriculture. But we've been hearing about that for as long as I can remember. The Phoenix Park one, which he said was launched in January. In fact, that seemed to have been scaled down significantly, because in the initial period, when the budget spoke to it, it was supposed to be a whole set of grand things, boat building and ship repair and
they say what they want. It don't matter. They can say anything. They can tell the pigs could fly too. Which they probably will tell you the next budget if they're there.
But 10 years later, Karen, it has seemed to have been whittled down to simply an industrial park.
Yes.
That's the point I make. It's now the Phoenix Park Industrial Park. First up, and it is just to reinforce the point that you've been making. Talk is cheap. You could say a lot of things, but what we have to do is we have to look at the evidence that supports what the minister is saying or contradicts what he is saying. Agriculture, another case in point. We're talking about agriculture, yet the main items within agriculture has been contracting significantly. Cocoa production
price this year. They got to increase it by 246%, but last year from 0 kilograms to 85,000 kilograms, and they also got an increase.
Correct. It's the same thing. It's the same thing with cocoa. The
And
production
cocoa too,
increased.
yes.
Yeah, it went from 8.5 thousand kilograms to 65,000 kilograms. We used to 36,000 tons in the 1930s.
Isn't that
You
something?
know,
I think the year before, 2023, they said the cocoa for export had declined by 90%. So the only way you have to go is up, you know. So we let us end by saying something good, because I can't think of anything good to say. So I will leave you, Indira, to say something good about that budget.
all I say, Karen, is that this is a beautiful country. There are opportunities. There are significant. There are no quick fixes. The problems we have can't be solved overnight, but they are solvable. One, two, we do have the intellectual capacity in order that is required in order to lead this change and lead this transformation. It is that those individuals are simply locked out of the offices of power or the places that they need to be, and instead what we have is a set of square pegs in wrong holes. If we are
We've done something with education more than many countries. I look at Jamaica. You go secondary school, you have to pay to go secondary school. In Jamaica.
Yeah, exactly. And we
you have to say that about our country. Yeah.
But the problem, Karen, is that we are not allowing those who can to be able to do what they can do in terms of the transforming of the economy. So we are where we are. But something has to give, and I remain optimistic. If not in our generation, I'm seeing
that would be my generation
stepping up. I'm seeing, younger persons than you and I then stepping up forward and putting their voices out and calling for different things. I am hopeful, optimistically hopeful that something will give. And I agree.
And to give the government a little credit, because I was harsh. I meant everything I said, but to be fair to them, I also would say that in many ways we have benefited a lot from our healthcare thing, even if it's not perfect. I mean, how many countries have a CDAP, even if it's not perfect? How many countries have free healthcare? Not many countries. And if you have it, they're paying taxes through your nose. I mean, if you're living in United States, poor you in United States. And if you're living in England, you're paying taxes through, really, and it's NHS still not functioning at optimal level. So we have to say that in education and health, it may not be perfect, far from perfect. And in social grants, you have to take care of those who can't take care of themselves. And I know it's a high number and it needs to be reduced for sure. But I will give the government some credit for something. But all in all, I consider them to be a failure. Oh God, sorry, Indira. Oh gosh, you see, being former minister of finance is not a good thing for this show.
Yeah, your program, you get the last say.
No, you can say what you want, because all now David say we need to wind up. But I talk so much, you should say whatever you need to say.
My last word is we should be in a lot better place than we are in. So I'm not as forgiving as you are. We should be in a much, much better place. I should not be having to worry about my children's future, and I have to. And I am not forgiven about that. And I think we need to do better. Those we put into government need to step up or step out and allow somebody else the opportunity.
Step down. Okay, Indira. Oh God, it was wonderful having you on. I have to have you on again, because I find I talk so much when I start talking about Ministry of Finance. It's too close to me, I think.
All right.
Thank you so much. David, I know you're saying you wanted us to shut up, right?
No. This has been very, very interesting, especially from Dr. Sajuan's point of view. I mean, both of you guys you saw one of the messages.
Yes. I saw some of them. I haven't seen anything.
Asking that you guys come out and educate the people at the community level.
I wouldn't mind doing that. But they might get in so much of it, but I don't mind doing that. I was an educator all my life, remember? Most of my life I was an educator. So anyhow, I've overstayed my time. Indira, it's wonderful having you. You've been so patient and gracious, and so accommodating to me and my passionate discourse. And I thank you so much. And I know I have to have you on again so we can talk in a deeper dive into a 5.5 hour budget. It deserves another round.
Okay, good night. Good night, Karen. Good
Good
night.
night, Indira. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
Thank you so
David.
much, ladies. That's it
Okay,
for today's
take care.
edition of
Bye-bye.
Hard Talk. Yeah, bye-bye. That's it for today's edition of Hard Talk with host Karen Nunez Tesheira. Karen will be back next Monday for another informative feature right here at Paul 102 Digital Monday.